What if I told you that culture of your workplace or even your home, it isn't what you say it is, but it's what you allow it to be? Today, we're going to unpack why culture isn't about what posters we have in the hallway or what we write in our employee handbook, but it's actually about the behaviors and the attitudes that we tolerate in all areas of our life where people are gathered. Welcome to the Rocky Garza Show, where we explore the collision of a deeply meaningful life and a wildly impactful career. I'm your host, Rocky Garza, and with over a decade of experience as a coach, consultant, and keynote speaker to many Fortune 500 companies, I'm here to share personal stories and expert advice to help you gain clarity, build confidence, and discover that you too can build the life you actually want. Whether you're a high achiever looking for a more full life or a leader striving for professional success with purpose, this podcast was designed with you in mind. Welcome to the Rocky Garza Show. I am your host, Rocky Garza. It is a pleasure to be with you today. Today, we are diving into culture. Now, I know this is a topic that can go a bunch of different directions. I know we've heard it in a variety of ways. We talk about culture as it relates to DE&I. We talk about culture as it relates to the ethos in an organization. We talk about culture even sometimes as it relates to us being in our homes and what's the culture of our home like. And when people come over, what do they experience? Or how do our kids behave if you have children? And so really today, what I want us to look at is that I think culture is the collective agreement of how we behave, how we interact, and how we engage. Now, I think oftentimes we do things like we put in core values and we have mission statements and we have vision and we put it up and we have them plastered on our walls. And I want to be very clear. I am all for mission, vision, values. Okay. I am with that game. The same thing in our home. I am all for us having mission, vision, values when it comes to being inside of our homes, what it was like as a family and what are we about and what do we do and what do we stand for? I love all of those parts and pieces. The thing I want to really drive home today, though, is that the contrast or the difference between that culture is not what you pontificate. Culture is not what you declare. Culture is not what the values or the thing. That's not what your culture is. Now, that may set a standard. Maybe it sets a level of expectation for what we hope and desire our culture to be. But culture is not what you pontificate. Culture is what you tolerate. And now I want to be clear when I say that because I think tolerate has this inherent negative connotation where we begin to go, if you're looking at what we tolerate, you mean like just what, like the lowest hanging fruit. You're talking about just like the bare minimum. I don't want a company that does bare minimum. I don't want a culture that's bare minimum. I understand what you're saying. I think what's valuable to note, though, is that regardless of the bar of excellence that you set, if we set a bar of excellence that is this high, but we tolerate behavior that is this low, your culture is what you tolerate. It is not what you pontificate. It's not what you say. Just because we walk around saying we have a culture of excellence does not mean we operate at a level of excellence. If the behavior that we allow, the behavior that we tolerate is less than excellent, then that is not, in fact, what our culture is. And so I want to challenge you today. I want you to think through, what is the culture of your environment? For some of you, you can think about it in your home. You can think about it in your small business. You can think about it in your organization. You can think about it with your team or your department. But what is the culture? What is it that you are tolerating? I recently have found myself in this conundrum at home as my kids are getting older and a little more independent, and they do a little less of what dad says as soon as dad says it. There is for sure a part of me that just wants to yell and wants to get angry and wants to be more aggressive and say, I am bigger and stronger and louder. And so you may not do what I want you to do, but I will force you into doing what I want you to do and take a step back and go, that's not the culture that's not what I want to tolerate either. That doesn't feel good. And so I find myself recently feeling honestly somewhat disconnected in the sense that where I feel like there used to be this space that I would say it and they would do it and they would act and I would appreciate it. And now they're stepping into their own little beings, their own little humanity. I find myself more and more taking a step back and going, how am I going to appropriately, kindly, with love, communicate and then stand my ground on the kind of behavior that is tolerated as opposed to just saying again and again, we don't do that. I think they realize and understand that's not behavior that we're saying we want to be a part of, but they're children. And so something in their body says, I can't help myself. I got to do it anyway. And the same is true on your team. We say that we do this and we do this and we talk about it in our meetings and we have a really great plan. But then when it comes to our ability to interact along the way and talk about the behavior on a daily or weekly basis that is tolerated, many times most organizations are simply doing check-ins quarterly at best. Yes, you may have a standing one-on-one every week, but come to find out, that's not exactly what we think it is anyway. And so I want you to think about, what is the cost for you of tolerating the wrong things? I think toxicity in teams is when bad behavior goes unchecked and it just goes and goes and goes. I think sometimes as leaders, we inadvertently permit dysfunction because we don't want to have a hard conversation. I can think of many organizations where there's been an employee who's been around. We can't have them stop now, but the havoc and the chaos that creates inside of an organization. It's time to have the hard conversation. It's time to dive in to have the conversation so we can communicate clearly the behaviors that we are going to tolerate, that we are approved because that's who we are, and then what we're going to do to prevent ourselves from continuing to tolerate behavior that is unnecessary. It's the same at home. And I know I keep going back and forth, but I often find that when we use examples about our home and how we apply those to work, it seems to be a lot more effective than it is to apply work examples to work, because it's easier to shrug that off and go, it's not me. But I know that you know what it feels like as a parent. I know you know what it feels like as a partner. I know you know what it feels like as a human being in other relationships with other human beings. I know you know what it feels like with your in-laws. I know you know what it feels like with your own parents. I know you know what it feels like with that friend or that sibling or that cousin who you have a broken relationship with. I know you know what that feels like. And so if we can think about our behavior there, I believe it gives us a window into how we change our behavior in our work. And so I want you to think about this. I want you to think about, how do we audit behavior, not just our words? How do we take stock about the behaviors that are actually being tolerated in our workplace, as opposed to just taking stock of our words? I told them not to. I said we don't do that. I reminded them of the core values. I hear you. But are we taking accountability for our behavior, or just simply the things that we talk about? How often are we communicating clearly to others what's acceptable and what isn't, what we do and what we don't, how we keep up and how we don't? How often do we I attempted to last night, it didn't go very well, we'll try again tonight. At family dinner, hey, about the tone and respect and what we do and how we operate. Last night was wheels off. Kids were ready to go back to school. They were losing their minds. It was a giggle fest. I was frustrated. I just sat there quietly because I knew if I did anything, I wouldn't be proud of myself. So I opted to say nothing last night. Sometimes that's the best case for you as well. Give it 24 hours. And then I think the reality is to be able to model and enforce behavior, model and enforce our boundaries. Leadership is an action. Leadership is what we do. It's how we show up. It's how we present ourselves. It is how we act with one another in our work. It's how we hold team members accountable. It's how we follow through. It's how we make sure that we maintain this level of tolerance. I would love to change the idea of tolerance, that tolerance is not about saying, I guess if that's the best you can do, I'll do it. But rather saying tolerance is saying, what are we willing to tolerate? How high can we go? I would encourage you to think through, how do you see these things playing out in your team? And what is your consistent role in each of those things? The reality is that being a leader is active. Ideally, it's proactive. Either way, it's active. I find many leaders are reactive. It's one type of leadership. But I would love for you to think through, what is the path to proactive leadership? I want to encourage you again to remind yourself that culture is what you tolerate. It's not what you preach. What's one thing that you're tolerating right now that you can change? What's one thing that you're tolerating that if you would change, it might dynamically enhance your team, dynamically enhance the way you operate, dynamically enhance your home? I would encourage you to think through that today. If you're interested in what we're up to and how you can become a proactive leader as well, I would encourage you to go to rockygarza.com/thepath. Again, that's rockygarza.com/thepath. Take a look. Check out the path to proactive leadership. And again, until next time, we'll dive into how vulnerability is the ultimate leadership superpower. Looking forward to talking to you soon. Have a great day. And as always, let's keep going.